You think I planned this? Sophie Gray stood near the center of the office, shoulders straight, voice steady, eyes fixed on the man across from her. You think I spent 6 years struggling so you could stand there and look at me like I stole something from you? Luca Agan did not reply. The office was quiet in the way money makes silence heavy. Floor-to-ceiling glass. Clean lines. Order everywhere. The kind of place built to keep emotion out. Sophie did not step back. She had learned long ago not to. On the rug between them, her son sat cross-legged, stacking wooden blocks. Blue on red, red on yellow. He hummed to himself, unaware that his name had just shifted the balance of the room. Luca's gaze dropped to the child for half a second, just long enough. That single glance told Sophie everything. Her jaw tightened. You don't get to look at him like that, she said. You don't get to stand there and decide who I am based on a story you don't know. Still, Luca said nothing. His silence felt louder than any argument. Sophie took a slow breath, not for him, but for herself, for the child behind her, for the years she carried alone. Outside the glass walls, the city moved as usual. Inside, something had cracked open. Sophie didn't flinch under the silence. She had heard worse. From landlords, from bosses, from the echo of her own doubts when the nights got too quiet. But this silence, this one stung different. Because Luca wasn't a stranger. Not anymore. You don't get to look surprised, she said calmly. Not when you've had 6 years and 100 chances to be present. But now that truth came to your doorstep with a name and a face. Now you show up. Luca's hands stayed at his sides. His tie was off, shirt sleeves rolled, jaw locked. Like a man used to control, but now unsure what to reach for. Tommy glanced up from his blocks. Mom, he said, holding up a tower. Sophie turned immediately, her tone softening. That's perfect, baby. Careful with the blue one. The boy nodded, returning to his task, content. She faced Luca again. You think this is about DNA, about legal rights? Let me stop you right there. This isn't a case file or a press release. This is a child, my child, a whole human being who learned to speak, to walk, to love, without you. Luca's mouth parted slightly. Still, no words came. He had nothing ready. Luca shifted his weight, finally stepping forward. I didn't know, he said. Low, firm. You knew enough. Sophie shot back. You knew my name. You knew where I worked the year after we met. If you wanted answers, you had the resources. She didn't yell. That would have given him too much. Her voice stayed even. It was dignity, not rage, that made her sharp. He blinked, barely. I thought you disappeared. You left before sunrise. Those 4 words hung in the room like a sentence being handed down. I didn't feel abandoned, she added. I felt resolved. And I chose to live, not chase. Tommy stacked another block, unaware that the silence around him now wasn't peace. It was restraint. I've been searching for him, Luca said. You have no idea what I've... She raised a hand. Stop. Don't rewrite the years. His mouth closed. The steel behind her words came from late rent, cold buses, missed meals, and a toddler with a fever at 2 a.m. You think money gives you the right to rewrite what never belonged to you in the first place? She asked. The shame in his eyes didn't come from guilt. It came from being too late. Tommy laughed at something only he understood, his tiny fingers tapping the side of the block tower. His sound broke the heaviness for a second, but only a second. Luca's eyes stayed on him too long. Sophie noticed. You don't get to stare at him like he's yours, she said quietly. He is mine, Luca replied, without flinching. No, she said, her tone flat. He's his own, and he belongs to the person who's been there. Luca stepped back, the words hitting their mark. Sophie crouched to pick up a juice box from the bag by her feet. She handed it to Tommy and watched him smile. She didn't smile back, not yet. She stood again, slow and steady. Don't act like this was a twist of fate. You're not a victim in this story. Luca let out a breath through his nose. I'm trying. Try quieter. She didn't care if the words cut. They needed to. This was the only language men like him understood, honest terms with no room to negotiate. The boy he'd been chasing existed right here, stacking towers and sipping fruit punch. And Luca had walked past him his entire life, until now. Luca's throat tightened, but he didn't speak again. Sofian looked at him, then past him, to the floor-to-ceiling windows. The skyline didn't impress her, neither did the marble floors or the branded pens on the desk. She had walked into plenty of polished places as the help. This time, she stood on her own terms. 6 years, she said, her voice quieter now. 6 birthdays, 6 school meetings, 6 winters of coughs and long nights. She paused. You can't step in now and expect to be anything more than a stranger with matching blood. That landed. Luca sat down slowly on the armrest of the couch behind him. He looked again at Tommy, really looked. The boy glanced back with a curious smile, then returned to his blocks. The distance between them wasn't legal. It wasn't about paperwork. It was time. And trust. Sofian gathered her bag, still watching Luca. You wanted answers, she said. Now you have one. She reached for Tommy's hand. He stood, blocks forgotten. As they walked toward the door, she turned once more. One more thing, she added. You don't get to love him if you don't respect me. Luca said nothing. But something in him cracked. Would you forgive someone who disappeared from your life, then returned with power and control? Comment below. Like this video if you believe truth deserves a second chance. The savannah air held a kind of quiet that suited Luca Egan more than he expected. The night wasn't supposed to stretch past midnight. Lind Corp had sent him to shake hands, pose for press, and leave, before the wine turned warm. But the moment he stepped into the riverside ballroom, something slowed. He noticed the crowd first, smooth voices, expensive shoes, shallow laughter. Then he noticed the woman standing near the terrace doors. She wasn't networking, wasn't laughing too loud, or scanning the room for someone important. She was still, watching the lights reflect off the slow-moving river. Black dress, clean lines, no jewelry. Her hair pulled back without effort. He didn't plan to walk toward her, but he did. You look like someone trying to breathe, he said. She turned her head slightly, not startled. Crowds make me tired, she replied. Her voice was low, steady, not forced. It sounded like someone who wasn't trying to impress anyone. Luca tucked one hand into his pocket. Same, neither of them introduced themselves. No titles, no backstory, no filtered versions. Just silence for a few beats, then a conversation that felt like a hallway without walls. They didn't smile much, but neither one walked away. They stood near the open terrace doors, away from the swirl of clinking glasses and rehearsed conversations. Sofian leaned slightly against the frame. Luca remained beside her, close but not too close. Neither moved to fill the silence with anything unnecessary. I thought these events were designed to make people feel important, she said after a while. Luca glanced at her. They are. That's why I rarely speak at them. You're not from around here, she noted. New York, he answered, then paused. But I live in airplanes more than cities. Sounds lonely. He shrugged. You get used to silence. Some of us don't. That hung between them for a moment. Honest words had weight, and both of them felt it. The music inside faded slightly as the quartet switched tempos. Sofian turned toward the river again. Her profile caught the dim terrace lighting. Not delicate, defined, like someone who'd walked through enough fire to know when to stop explaining herself. He found himself watching her, not with interest, but with awareness. She didn't seek attention. She claimed space. So what do you do? He asked. Tonight, she said, looking at him now. I'm surviving the evening without giving my resume. He smirked. Fair enough. That was the end of it. No job titles, no business cards. Just 2 people sharing air, not status. Later in the evening, they ended up sitting at a small table tucked near the rear garden path. Neither one had moved deliberately. They simply walked together once the crowd began thinning out. I didn't expect to talk to anyone tonight, Sofian said, sipping water. Neither did I. Usually, I blend into these things just enough to leave unnoticed. That sounds practiced. It is. She nodded. I used to do that too. Then I stopped trying. He leaned back in his chair, elbows loose at his sides. Why? It made me small, she said plainly. And I don't owe anyone the quiet version of me. There wasn't defiance in her tone. It was clarity. Luca absorbed that. Her words didn't challenge him. They adjusted something in the room. He tapped his thumb lightly against the edge of his glass. I don't think I've heard someone say that before. That's because most people are trying to be liked. They talked about little things then. How the food tasted bland. How galas always smelled like polished silver and too much perfume. How both of them hated small talk, but didn't feel the need to fill space with noise right now. They didn't flirt. They didn't posture. They listened, responded, paused. It felt like something honest, even if neither knew what to call it. The room was quiet when Sofian opened her eyes. Soft light pressed through the curtain slats. Not harsh, not cold, just morning. The second thing she noticed was the space beside her, empty. She didn't panic. She didn't sit up fast or check her phone. She stayed still for a few seconds, breathing in the reality of it. Luca was gone. His shirt was no longer on the chair. No scribbled note. No made coffee. Just stillness. She sat up slowly, drawing the sheet over her chest, but there was no shame under her skin. No regret swimming in her thoughts. The night hadn't been a transaction. There were no promises to follow up. No expectations to chase. It had been quiet. Real. Unrehearsed. She had let herself feel something without performing for it. That was enough. Rising, she stepped into the hotel bathroom and turned on the faucet. The water ran smooth, steady. Her reflection didn't look fragile. It looked clear. Later, she packed her dress. No rush, no soundtrack in her mind, just movement. By the time she reached the street, the city was already busy. People honked. Workers walked with purpose. Sofian didn't look back at the hotel. Some nights leave you lost. This one didn't. It left her certain. The nausea wasn't new, but the timing was off. Sofian stood in the cramped break room of the law office where she filed case documents part-time. Her second coffee sat untouched beside a stack of reports. The fluorescent lights above didn't help. She pressed a hand to her stomach and exhaled slowly. The date on the calendar behind the microwave didn't lie. She was late, and not by a little. She stopped by the pharmacy on the way home. One test, nothing fancy. She didn't need anyone's opinion or emotional support. That night, after Tommy's bedtime stories had long stopped existing and before early motherhood had any shape in her life, she stood barefoot in her apartment bathroom. The plastic stick in her hand turned pink in seconds. She sat on the closed toilet lid, back against the wall. No tears, no gasps. Just quiet. She whispered to the room, "Okay." Not because it was okay, but because it had to be. She didn't call anyone. She didn't text him. That night in Savannah had ended the way it was meant to. She had woken up alone, but not broken. Now she had woken up changed, and still whole. There was a moment, a short one, where her fingers hovered over her phone screen. Luca's number wasn't saved. She hadn't even known his last name that night. But if she asked the right person from the gala committee, pulled a few threads, maybe. No. She put the phone down. This wasn't about ego. It wasn't about bitterness either. It was about peace. Sofian had spent too many years in her early 20s waiting for men to follow up, to show up, to mean what they said in dim rooms. None of them ever did. She wasn't going to beg another one, no matter how sincere that night had felt. If he had wanted to know her, he would have stayed. If he had wanted to be found, he would have left something behind besides a memory and a missing name. She chose to carry the truth alone. Not out of pride, out of protection. "I won't let my child grow up thinking they were a mistake," she said to herself in the mirror. Her hand rested lightly on her stomach. "I'll make sure they never feel like someone had to be begged to love them." Her voice didn't tremble, It didn't have to. She was done chasing. She had things to build now. The hospital where she gave birth smelled like bleach and overbrewed coffee. Tommy entered the world on a Thursday. Rain poured outside, thunder low in the background. His cry was strong from the first second. A nurse laughed and said, "He's got lungs. That's good." Sophie-Anne didn't laugh, but her grip tightened around the tiny fingers offered to her. She named him after her grandfather. Simple, no hyphen, no hidden meaning. Just Tommy. The days that followed didn't give her much time to dream. She worked front desks, cleaned rental apartments on weekends, and picked up temp work at legal offices when she could. Most nights, her shoes came off after midnight. Then came online classes, an associate degree in business law. She kept her laptop on the kitchen counter while Tommy napped in a second-hand crib. Sometimes she studied through the night, nodding off with legal briefs on her chest. The fridge wasn't always full, but the lights stayed on. Tommy never missed a wellness visit. She kept a binder of receipts, appointments, immunization cards. Order was how she survived. The few friends she kept thought she was strong. She knew better. She wasn't strong. She was tired, but she kept going, because Tommy deserved that. By Tommy's third birthday, Sophie-Anne had moved twice, upgraded from public transit to a used Corolla, and completed her degree with a GPA she never bragged about, but was proud of. She didn't throw big parties. She baked a small cake. They wore paper hats. She took photos and taped them to the fridge like trophies, each one proof she hadn't waited for rescue. She met plenty of people over the years. Kind ones, confused ones, men who offered help too fast and disappeared even faster. People who asked where the father was, with a tone that assumed a mistake had been made. She never answered defensively. She didn't owe explanations. Her life wasn't a question mark. It was a choice. Some nights, she sat on the edge of Tommy's bed, watching him sleep, wondering if she'd done enough that day. Other nights, she lay awake in her room, silent, holding the edge of her pillow, praying that her quiet strength would be enough to make him feel secure. She never reached back into the past, never searched for Luca, never revisited that night. She didn't need him to validate her experience to make it real. She didn't need his name to make Tommy whole. Self-worth doesn't beg, it builds. Luca Agan didn't open his own mail, not unless it was labeled confidential, and even then, it had to come from a name he recognized. That morning, the envelope came tucked between quarterly forecasts and a contract from overseas. It had no return address, no logo, no typed name. The assistant had nearly thrown it out. Luca opened it without thinking. The moment he saw the strip of paper, long, narrow, labeled in hospital ink, he paused. It wasn't a threat. It was a result, a paternity report. His name, a child's name, Tommy Gray. Probability of paternity, 99.998%. He read it 3 times. The rest of the room went quiet. He sat back slowly, unsure what to hold on to, his desk or the memory that tried to surface. The name Gray didn't help. It was too common. But the boy's first name, that one struck somewhere low in his chest. He reached for his phone, checked calendars, looked at that night in Savannah, counted backward. The math didn't lie. Luca had built companies on precision. This was no coincidence. Still, there was no note, no demand, just data. The kind that ends denials. He didn't ask who sent it. He knew the better question. Why now? He spent the rest of the day ignoring meetings. The document stayed in the center of his desk, untouched but heavy. He didn't move it, didn't cover it. Every time his eyes drifted, they returned to that one name, Tommy. He asked his legal team to hold his calls. Then he opened his secure database, cross-referenced hospital codes, lab markings, dates. The document wasn't fake. The hospital listed was real. The codes matched paternity documentation protocols used by Georgia health departments. But still, no sender. Luca was used to threats, extortion, envy wrapped in legalese. This was different. No threats, No accusations. Just a result, which meant someone didn't want money. They wanted him to know, and that scared him more. He searched his calendar from 6 years ago. Found the charity event in Savannah. Vague names. 200 guests. No contact sheets with full details. He opened the guest photos. Blurred background shots, half faces, filtered social posts. None of them helped. He remembered her eyes, though. The stillness, the calm, the quiet of that night pressed into his memory like a fingerprint. And now a child, somewhere out there. A boy who carried his blood. No sender, no explanation, just truth that couldn't be denied, and he had no idea what to do with it. Over the next few weeks, Luca hired a private team. He gave them everything he remembered. The hotel, the city, the date, the black dress, her voice. But without a last name or a photo, they hit walls fast. Every lead returned the same answer, no match. He combed through charity databases and hospitality records, found receipts, hotel logs, even catering staff photos. Still nothing. The woman from that night had vanished with precision. Or maybe she'd never left a trace to begin with. He began noticing children more, at airports, in cafes, walking beside mothers. Every time he saw a boy around 5 or 6, he found himself searching for resemblance. He hated himself for that. Not because he felt guilt, but because he felt panic. Panic that someone had kept something this monumental from him, that a version of his life, his legacy, had been unfolding without his knowledge. He didn't tell anyone, not his assistant, not his lawyer, not even Isabella, whose absence from his emotional life had grown loud by then. The man who built an empire on timing and calculation suddenly had no direction, no control. Only a name on a sheet, Tommy Gray. Who was he? Where was he? And what kind of man had Luca been to miss all of it? 3 months after the letter, Luca sat at the edge of a conference table reviewing updated security protocols for his residential staff. HR had flagged one of the family's nannies had relocated overseas. A replacement was needed. The agency assured discretion and experience. He nodded through the paperwork. "I'll trust your final choice," he told them. 2 days later, they scheduled an in-person introduction. New candidate. Background cleared. Strong references. The meeting was routine until the moment the glass doors opened. She stepped in, holding a child's hand. Sophian, her face, her walk, unmistakable. She stood taller now, more deliberate in her presence. But it was her. And the boy. Luca froze. The dimple. The brow tilt. The eyes. Everything in him stalled. Sophian looked right at him. No smile. No hesitation. Just clarity. "I believe we're expected," she said, voice calm. Luca didn't speak. Tommy let go of her hand and walked over to the reception chair, pulling out a small toy car from his pocket. He sat down, started rolling it across the cushion without a word. Luca stared. The boy didn't look up. Didn't need to, because the truth wasn't on paper anymore. It had just walked through his door. The nanny agency didn't tell her the client's name. They never did with high-profile placements. Confidentiality agreements were standard. The location was listed vaguely: midtown high-rise, private family quarters, multi-level security. Sophian had taken harder jobs with less information. Still, as she held Tommy's hand and approached the revolving doors of the Lindcourt building, something in her chest tightened. The lobby rose high and bright, all polished glass and steel. Reception sat behind a minimalist marble desk. Not a child-friendly place, but Sophian knew how to fit into sharp-edged spaces. She gave her name to the front desk assistant. "You're here for the final screening," the woman said. "Take the express elevator to the 47th floor." Tommy held onto her coat gently as they moved past the sleek halls. He didn't fidget. He rarely did. He'd learned to observe before acting, like his mother. She didn't know where the job would lead, only that the pay was higher than anything else she'd been offered. Stability mattered now. The elevator doors opened to a quieter corridor, with muted tones and private offices. She adjusted Tommy's collar. He looked up. "Will it be a big house?" She smiled faintly. It's not a house, baby. It's a workplace. Neither of them knew, yet, that it was more than that. Luca had intended to skip the screening. His HR manager had insisted he meet the final candidate, just as a formality. The agency's top recommendation, they'd said. He had skimmed her resume. It didn't register. But when the elevator dinged and the door opened, something in him shifted before he understood why. There she was. The same calm. The same stillness. Older, yes. Stronger too, but unmistakable. His body stiffened before his mind caught up. Her hand rested gently on a boy's shoulder. Luca blinked once. Twice. Sofian? No way. She didn't flinch under his gaze. She met his stare with quiet strength, the way she had done once before, on a terrace by a river years ago. She wasn't here for him. That much was clear. She had no idea. The boy's face turned slightly, scanning the room. Curly hair, bright eyes, a calm kind of alertness. Luca took a breath. He didn't speak. He watched, because something in him already knew. Recognition didn't need facts. It arrived without warning, without permission, and it settled in the gut before it reached the brain. Tommy didn't hesitate when the assistant offered him a cup of juice. He took it with a polite thank you and a tiny nod. The receptionist smiled. Well-mannered. That's rare. Sofian gave a soft, practiced smile in return. Tommy stood by her side until he spotted a low coffee table with small wooden models arranged neatly on top. Decor more for style than play, but interesting enough. He asked, "Can I touch?" Luca hadn't moved from his spot. He listened. Sofian looked at the receptionist. The woman nodded. Tommy walked over, lifted a wooden airplane gently, and turned it over in his hands. "This looks like the one in my bedtime book," he said to no one in particular. The staff chuckled lightly. He wasn't loud. He didn't seek attention, but he owned every room he stepped into, in a way only children raised on gentle love do. Luca's chest tightened. He couldn't name what he felt, but it was happening. Tommy placed the plane back perfectly. Then he walked to where Luca stood. "You work here?" he asked. Luca bent slightly. "Yes." Tommy nodded thoughtfully. "It's very shiny." Then walked back to his mother. Luca didn't breathe for a full second. It was too natural, too familiar. Something was pulling him closer. Later that afternoon, Luca sat in his office reviewing quarterly projections, but the numbers blurred. His mind had slipped out of the present. He replayed it all. The way Tommy tilted his head when he was curious, the careful way he placed things back where they belonged, the quiet confidence in his voice. Luca knew those traits. He carried them too. But this wasn't logic. It wasn't data. This was something slower, softer, subtle. He didn't call security. He didn't alert the agency. He didn't demand answers. He watched the feed from the security camera outside the guest waiting area. Tommy had fallen asleep on Sofian's lap. Her hand rested gently on his back. Rhythmic, calm. She leaned her head back against the chair, eyes closed, posture still protective. The tug wasn't instant. It wasn't overwhelming. It was something else entirely, like gravity realigning, like truth arriving without words. He didn't need the old paternity result anymore. It was sitting across the hall, breathing, asking about airplanes. Luca didn't know what to say, but he knew what he had to do next. Because the silence between them had lasted long enough, Tommy adjusted faster than anyone expected. By the third day of the trial placement, he no longer clung to Sofian's leg when they entered the penthouse level. He walked beside her instead, head high, eyes scanning the wide hallways with curiosity rather than caution. He learned which elevator chimed softer, which hallway echoed less, where the sunlight fell strongest in the late afternoon. Luca noticed everything. He told himself he was only observing as a homeowner concerned with security and routine. That was the excuse he used when he paused meetings to watch Tommy wander the living space with quiet confidence. Tommy treated the penthouse like a library, not a playground. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He touched things carefully and always put them back. One morning, Luca walked into the living room to find Tommy seated on the rug, lining up books from shortest to tallest. "Is this okay?" the boy asked without looking up. Luca nodded. "That's fine." Tommy smiled, a small, satisfied curve of the mouth, then went back to his task. Sofian watched from the kitchen doorway, arms folded, unreadable. "You don't have to stay in one room," Luca said to her. She met his eyes. "We're fine where we are." Tommy, meanwhile, grew comfortable enough to hum while he worked. Luca had never allowed anyone to hum in his space. He didn't stop the boy. It was the laugh that did it. Not loud, not sudden. Just a soft burst of joy when Tommy dropped a spoon during breakfast, and it bounced twice before settling upright. He laughed the same way Luca did when he was a child. The realization hit Luca mid-sip of coffee. He froze. The dimple appeared when Tommy smiled again, wide and unguarded. Same place, same depth. Luca set his mug down slowly. Sofian noticed. Her eyes sharpened, watching Luca watch her son. Tommy climbed onto one of the stools, swinging his legs gently. "This place is quiet," he said. "I like it." Luca swallowed. "I do too." Tommy studied him for a moment. "You don't talk a lot. I'm working on that," Luca replied. Tommy nodded, as if that answer made perfect sense. Later that afternoon, Luca found himself standing in the doorway of the playroom he'd had converted overnight. He hadn't planned it. The order had gone through without conscious thought. Tommy entered, eyes widening. "For me?" he asked. "Yes," Luca said. Tommy didn't jump or shout. He simply walked in and sat down, running his fingers across the table. "Thank you," he said. That was it. No question. No doubt. Luca turned away before his face could betray him. The resemblance stopped being subtle. Luca saw it in the way Tommy frowned when thinking, in the way he listened before speaking, in the way he preferred order but accepted chaos without fear. These were not learned habits. They were inherited. Luca requested the old report from his secure files and read it again late one night while the penthouse slept. 99.998%. At the time, the number had felt abstract. Now it had a face, a voice, a bedtime routine. He watched Sofian guide Tommy through brushing his teeth, patient and firm. "Gentle," she said. "We don't rush what matters." Tommy nodded, mimicking her movements. Luca leaned against the hallway wall, unseen. There was no anger in him now, only clarity. This child had not been hidden from him out of malice. He had been missed because life moved forward without him. That truth hurt more than any accusation. Luca pressed his palm to the wall, grounding himself. He could no longer pretend uncertainty, but he also couldn't speak yet, because once he did, nothing would remain the same. The final confirmation arrived the following morning, not by mail, by call. Luca stepped into his private office and locked the door. "Yes," the genetics specialist said. "We've reviewed everything again. There is no error. The child is yours." Luca closed his eyes. The room felt smaller. When the call ended, he didn't move. He didn't go back into the living area. He didn't look at the security feed. He sat alone, elbows on his desk, head lowered. For the first time in years, Luca Agan had no strategy, no plan, no control. Sofian noticed his absence by dinner. "Where is he?" she asked quietly. The housekeeper shrugged. "He hasn't come out." Sofian nodded once, suspicion settling in. Tommy ate his meal calmly. "He's quiet today," he said. Sofian forced a smile. Some people need time, but Luca wasn't resting. He was unraveling inside silence, locked away with a truth he could no longer escape. What would you do if you found out the child you've been missing is already under your roof? Let us know in the comments. The morning after the call, Luca didn't hide. He showed up to breakfast. Tommy greeted him casually, too young to notice tension. "Morning," the boy said between bites of oatmeal. "Morning," Luca replied. Sofian didn't speak right away. She stirred her coffee with deliberate slowness. Luca sat across from her, ignoring the guardedness in her shoulders. "He's thriving," he said. "He always has." she answered, without looking up. Tommy hummed softly, lost in a rhythm only he understood. Luca waited until the boy left the table to grab a book before speaking again. "I know." She looked up. "I know who he is," he said. Her face didn't move. "Took you long enough. I didn't know how to ask." "You didn't." Luca leaned forward. "Let me talk to you. Just you. Say what you need to say." "I don't want to ruin what you've built." "You can't ruin it," she said calmly. "It was built without you." The honesty stung, but he didn't flinch. "I want to be in his life." Sophien's hands stayed wrapped around her cup. "Wanting and deserving are different." He nodded slowly, accepting the weight of her words. She stood, clearing the dishes. The conversation had begun, but nothing was granted yet. Later that day, while Tommy napped, Sophien found Luca in the study. He stood near the window back to the door, watching the sky darken. She didn't knock. "He's not a claim," she said. Luca turned. "I'm not trying to claim him. But you will. People like you always do. With lawyers, with control. That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" Luca stepped forward, slowly. "It's me. Trying." She nodded once. "Trying doesn't mean I stop protecting him. I don't want to take him from you. But you could. That's the difference. You walk into rooms and shift the ground. I walk in and steady it." Her voice was firm, but never raised. "You don't get to play hero here. You disappeared. You left. Even if you didn't know, you weren't here. I can be now." She stepped closer, standing between him and the door. "You won't take him. I don't want custody. No. You won't take him emotionally. You won't flood him with promises you can't keep. You won't confuse his routine. You won't rewrite his life because you finally got curious." Luca didn't speak. "You want to know him?" she asked. "Yes." "Then start with respect." Then she left the room, quietly but unmistakably in control. The next few days passed without tension, but not without edges. Sophien remained polite, present, and distant. She responded to Luca's questions with clarity but no warmth. He helped where he could, quietly. Set the table, tidied up after Tommy's art sessions, refilled the dishwasher. Nothing loud, nothing expected. One night, after Tommy had gone to bed, she found him sitting alone in the living room, lights low. "You don't like silence, do you?" she asked. "I'm learning to sit with it." She stayed by the doorway. "You want access to him," she said. "But access comes with accountability. I'm not here to take over." "But you've done that before," she replied. He looked up. "You've stepped into things too late and tried to manage them. You've cleaned up mistakes with control. That won't work here." He nodded. "Understood. Tommy doesn't need a powerful man. I'm not trying to impress him." "Then don't try with me either," she said. "Don't show up with big gestures or expensive promises." He paused. "What does he need?" "Presence," she answered, "and rhythm, and someone who won't vanish when the moment gets quiet." Luca didn't respond. He had learned to negotiate with executives, with courts. But this was learning to earn space, not demand it. The shift didn't come with a speech. It came with repetition. Luca started showing up to morning routines. Quietly, no announcement, just there. He made breakfast on Tuesdays. Tommy liked plain eggs and toast. No need to ask twice. On Thursdays, he handled school drop-off, not because anyone told him to, but because he remembered. He didn't interrupt bedtime anymore. He waited until the lights dimmed and the door clicked shut before he stepped into shared spaces. He didn't try to take the lead. He adjusted. One night, Tommy fell asleep in the reading corner of the study. Luca found him curled over a picture book. He didn't wake him. He carried him to bed. Sophien watched from the hallway. She said nothing, but she didn't stop him. Another morning, Tommy ran back from the door, hugged Luca around the leg, then ran off again. The hug was quick, but Luca stood still for 5 minutes afterward. He never mentioned it. He didn't call his assistant. He didn't send updates. He just stayed in the room, holding the moment. The grand gestures never came. The presence did. And that was what began to matter. Not what he brought, but what he stayed for. Luca always believed love could be scheduled. Meetings, milestones, birthdays. He had calendar blocks for everything. He sent gifts. He arranged care. He signed school funding papers for distant relatives like they were contracts. But nothing prepared him for the messiness of parenting done up close. He found himself in unfamiliar roles, buttoning a shirt one-handed while Tommy squirmed, learning which cartoons were too loud, realizing that 3-year-olds don't care how many people report to you if their socks feel funny. The first time Tommy spilled juice on an important folder, Luca paused, then laughed. Sofian raised an eyebrow. That's new. I'd usually fire someone for this. Tommy looked up, alarmed. Luca knelt. You're not someone, he said. You're mine. It slipped out before he could catch it. Tommy blinked, smiled faintly, and returned to his cereal. Sofian said nothing. But that evening, she left Tommy with Luca during her quick store run, without being asked. It was a small thing, but for Luca, it was a moment louder than applause. Parenting wasn't about presents. It was about patience, about picking up the spoon again after it fell, and not complaining when it happened twice more. He was learning, not perfectly, but honestly. When the dentist appointment reminder came through, Luca offered to go. Sofian hesitated. You sure? He nodded. Yeah. I'll take the morning off. Tommy looked up from his cereal. Do I get a sticker after? 2, Luca said. 1 for bravery, 1 for honesty. Tommy grinned. The appointment wasn't complicated, but it left a mark on Luca. He watched as Tommy gripped his hand tightly in the waiting room, not from fear, but habit, trust, a silent tether between two people who hadn't spoken truths out loud, but lived them quietly. Afterward, they stopped for ice cream. I thought sweets weren't allowed after dentists, Tommy asked, spoon halfway to his mouth. You think rules make sense all the time? Luca asked. Tommy laughed. No. Good. That night, Luca walked with him down the street, past the bakery, past the bookstore, past the woman selling sunflowers by the corner. Tommy pointed. Mummy likes those. I know. You gonna buy her one? Luca looked at him. I'm thinking about it, he said. Gentle effort. That's what this was. No rush, just small steps. The kind of steps you take when you finally understand that connection doesn't shout. It walks, steady, unforced, and it listens more than it speaks. The kitchen was warm from the oven. Luca had offered to help with dinner. Sofian gave him a task, simple enough. Chop vegetables, stay out of the way. He followed directions, quietly, focused. Tommy sat on a stool nearby, drawing with crayons and offering random feedback. Daddy cuts slow, he muttered. Luca smiled without reacting. He didn't correct the word. Sofian didn't either. They moved around each other carefully, passing utensils, exchanging soft nods. No tension but no ease. Until the garlic. Luca reached for it at the same time Sofian did. Their hands met. Brief. Skin against skin. Warm. Unexpected. Neither of them pulled away immediately. Her fingers didn't tighten. His didn't retreat. They just stayed, still, for a breath too long. Then both withdrew without a word. The space filled quickly with the sound of Tommy humming. Sofian resumed slicing. Luca returned to his bowl. But something hung in the air, like a page in a book left half-turned. Not flirtation, not avoidance. Something else. The memory of contact. The reminder that underneath the layers, resentment, protection, time, there was still something untouched. Neither of them acknowledged it, but neither of them forgot it. Not that night, not after. The next morning, Luca poured coffee for both of them before she asked. He handed her the mug across the counter. Her fingers brushed his again. Neither moved. No apology. No flinch. Just a stillness that settled. Familiar now. Tommy ran into the room wearing mismatched socks, laughing as he held up a plastic dinosaur. Luca bent down. He needs a name. Spiky, Tommy said with pride. Spiky. It is, Sofian sipped the coffee. Luca leaned against the counter. "Thanks for yesterday," she said finally. He nodded. "I'm glad I went. You're different lately. I'm present. That's not the same thing. It is to me." She didn't argue. She didn't hand him anything more, but she didn't take anything away either. The quiet between them had changed. Not healed, not resolved, but softened. Later that evening, as they passed each other in the hallway, her arms full of laundry, his hands full of Tommy's toy bins, they brushed shoulders. She didn't say "excuse me." He didn't apologize. They paused, looked at each other, held it. No smile, no retreat. Just a moment. Simple. Still, neither reached again, but neither let go. It ended in a quiet courtroom. No press, no drama. Just papers exchanged, signatures offered, and silence acknowledged. Luca's marriage to Isabella had been distant long before the official split. Built on reputation, not connection. They'd stopped being a couple long before lawyers got involved. "I wish you peace," Isabella said as she stood, gathering her coat. "And I wish you freedom," Luca replied. They left with no arguments, no final blow, only an agreement to stop pretending. That same evening, Luca returned home. Tommy greeted him at the door with a toy in hand. "He lost his tail," he said, holding up a plastic dinosaur missing a piece. Luca knelt. "We'll find it." He didn't mention the divorce, didn't feel the need. It wasn't a performance, it was a step forward. Later, while washing dishes, he told Sofian. Simple, clear. "It's done," he said. She didn't ask for details, only nodded. "I didn't do it for you," he added. "I know," she replied. "I did it for clarity." Good. That was all. No questions, no assumptions, just understanding. Some endings don't need an audience. They only need to make space for something better. And this time, Luca wasn't rushing toward noise. He was choosing quiet truth. Their routines deepened without labels. Mornings became shared, evenings more fluid. Tommy asked fewer questions about who stayed and who left. He seemed to feel the steadiness before it was ever explained. Luca didn't try to charm his way into more. He folded laundry beside her, replaced light bulbs without being asked about her day without turning it into an interrogation. Sofian watched this with caution, but not suspicion. She had seen charm before. This wasn't it. This was rhythm, unforced, consistent. One night, they both reached for the same bottle of olive oil. She let him take it. He poured it quietly and set it down without a word. Later, as they packed leftovers into containers, she finally asked, "Why now?" He wiped his hands with a towel. "Because I spent too long wanting control. Now I just want peace." "Peace isn't given," she said. "I know. That's why I'm not asking for it. I'm earning it." She didn't respond, but she didn't leave the room either. They stood side by side in the kitchen, finishing their tasks without hurry. Growth doesn't shout. It listens, waits, and shows up again the next day. Luca did. And slowly, Sofian began to trust what didn't need to be said. The night Tommy stayed with a neighbor for a sleepover, the apartment felt quieter than usual. Luca offered to make dinner. They ate by the window. No music, just city sounds in the background. Halfway through the meal, Sofian set her fork down. "You ever wonder what would have happened if you stayed that morning?" Luca took a breath. Every day since the letter arrived. She looked at him. "I wasn't waiting, you know." "I know. I wasn't hurt either. I just knew the story was done." He nodded slowly. "Until it wasn't." She leaned back. "It still could be. We don't have to rewrite anything." "I'm not trying to rewrite," he said. "I'm trying to respect what exists." That silenced the room for a moment. She stood, walked to the window, arms crossed. Luca joined her, careful not to crowd her space. "I don't want to earn you through Tommy," he said. "You can't. I want to know you again. Not as a parent, as a person." She looked at him then. Eyes tired, but clear. "I'm not the same woman from that night. I'm not the same man." Another pause. This time, she didn't move away. When their lips finally met, it wasn't dramatic. It was calm, careful, true. After that kiss, nothing changed overnight. There were no declarations, no promises scribbled on napkins, no grand romantic lines meant to echo through memory. Instead, there was breakfast. He made it. She brewed the coffee. Tommy returned home, chattering about cartoons, unaware that anything had shifted at all. They didn't announce their closeness. They simply stopped pretending it didn't exist. Luca no longer stood beside her like a visitor. He moved through the home like someone who belonged, not because he claimed it, but because he contributed to it. Sofian didn't soften instantly, but she smiled more. And when Luca reached for her hand one evening during a movie, she didn't pull away. She laced her fingers through his. In public, they remained private. No need for onlookers, no need for validation. Luca understood now. Power was loud. Presence was quiet. And the latter mattered more. On a rainy Thursday, Tommy crawled into their bed at 5 a.m. Sofian was the first to wake. Luca opened one eye, reached behind him, and tucked the blanket over the boy. They lay in silence, 3 heartbeats under one roof. No one said a word. They didn't need to. They were building. They sat on opposite ends of the couch, the television off, lights dimmed low. Tommy had gone to bed early after a long day at school. Sofian turned toward Luca. Her expression didn't carry hostility, but it held weight. "I need to know what this is," she said. Luca didn't rush to answer. He'd learned better by now. "No games," she continued. "No stepping halfway in. I'm here," he said. "Physically, yes. But I need to know you're here in decision. Not guilt. Not obligation." Luca sat forward, elbows resting on his knees. "I'm not doing this to fix something. I'm here because I want to build forward." With honesty, she studied him carefully. "I've lived enough life to know when a man's hiding behind timing," she said. "You've had years of choices. Now that truth showed up at your door, you don't get to rewrite the narrative." "I'm not trying to control the past," he said. "I'm trying to be clear about the present." She nodded slowly. "I don't want control," he added. "I want connection. And I know that only works if you're never left wondering." Sofian leaned back and folded her arms. "No secrets? No secrets," he repeated. She didn't reply immediately, but she stayed. That was her answer. Over the next week, the air between them felt lighter, not new, not fragile, just open. They didn't revisit old chapters. No need. The wounds that mattered had been addressed. The rest had faded on their own. Luca deleted old voicemails he hadn't realized he was still holding on to. Sofian packed away photos from harder years, not to forget them, but to stop letting them take up space in the present. Neither of them spoke Isabella's name, not out of avoidance, but respect. That story was over. They didn't bring up the early silence between them after Savannah. No blame, no regret. One night, as they washed dishes together, Luca asked, "Do you still wonder what life would have looked like if we had stayed in touch back then?" "No," Sofian answered, "because it wouldn't have worked." "Why?" "You weren't ready to stay, and I wasn't ready to be seen." He nodded. "You're probably right." "No probably about it." They laughed lightly. And for the first time, the laughter didn't feel like covering something up. It felt like breathing without effort. No buried resentment. No returning ghosts. They had come through enough fire separately. Now they were walking into calm. Together, with their eyes wide open. It came quietly. Tommy was coloring at the kitchen table, Luca on a call nearby, Sofian loading the dishwasher. "Why is my name Gray if yours is Egan?" he asked casually. The question stopped them both. Luca ended his call mid-sentence. Sofian closed the dishwasher and turned around, drying her hands. Tommy looked up. "My friend at school said his mom and dad, and he all have the same last name." Luca walked over and sat beside him. "That's a great question," he said gently. Sofian sat on the other side. "We gave you my name when you were born," she said, "because at that time, I was the only one who knew you. Tommy blinked. You didn't know each other? We knew each other once, Luca said. But I didn't know you existed until later. Why? I made a mistake, he said simply. I left before I should have asked more. That's on me. Tommy looked between them. You're not in trouble, Sofian said with a soft smile. I'm not mad, Tommy answered. I just wanted to know. That's fair, Luca replied. Tommy turned back to his coloring. I like grey. Then you can keep it, Luca said. You don't have to change anything unless you want to. Okay. And that was that. The truth, spoken gently. Later that night, Luca poured tea while Sofian folded laundry on the couch. He asked calmly, Luca said. He always does, she replied. He thinks before he reacts. Luca nodded. You taught him that. We taught him that now, she corrected. They sat in silence for a moment. Then she added, You answered well. I followed your lead. You didn't need to. I wanted to. She folded the last shirt and placed it in the basket. He's going to ask more. As he grows, I'll be here. Sofian looked at him. Not just physically. He met her gaze. Emotionally. Logically. Quietly. That's what I need from a partner. He smiled slightly. That's what I am. No grand gesture followed. But the way they moved after, cleaning up together, sharing space without friction, confirmed what neither had to say. They were a unit now. Not perfect, not poetic, but present, consistent. Tommy entered the room, rubbing his eyes. I forgot to put Spiky back in his bin, he mumbled. Luca stood. Let's do it together. He reached down. Tommy grabbed his hand without hesitation. Sofian watched them walk down the hall, one tall frame beside one small one. She didn't need speeches. She had presence. She had them, now answering life's questions together. The ceremony lasted 12 minutes. No aisle, no orchestra, no distant cousins flown in for show, just 2 signatures, a courthouse, and one friend serving as witness. Sofian wore a slate-grey dress, minimal makeup, and the same quiet confidence she carried in every other room. Luca wore a dark suit and didn't check his watch once. They didn't exchange rings that day. Those would come later. Today was about structure, not symbols. After the clerk handed them the final documents, Luca reached for Sofian's hand. She laced her fingers through his, calm and sure. Outside, the city moved as usual. No photographers waited. No press release followed. It was their choice. Not a moment built for others to interpret, but for them to live. They left the courthouse without fanfare. Just presence. Later, over lunch, Luca raised his glass of water. To doing this with clarity, he said. Sofian clinked hers lightly, and no illusions. No one clapped. No one posted. But it was done. Real. Clean. The kind of start that didn't need a spotlight. They had both lived through loud things that fell apart. Now they were choosing quiet things built to last. When they picked Tommy up from school, he ran into their arms. Both of them bent down at once. He threw one arm around each of their necks. You came together, he said, eyes wide with excitement. We did, Luca said. We always will, Sofian added. As they walked down the sidewalk, Tommy walked between them, holding both their hands. Small feet, big energy. Pedestrians glanced their way, not because they were recognizable, but because something about them looked solid, whole. Tommy looked up and asked, Is today special? Yes, Sofian answered. Very. He tilted his head. Is it like a birthday? Luca smiled. Sort of. It's the day our family said yes. To what? To each other, Sofian said gently. Tommy grinned. Can we have pancakes for dinner? Absolutely, Luca replied. That night, they made them together. Tommy cracked the eggs. Luca handled the stove. Sofian flipped with expert precision. When they sat down to eat, Luca glanced at the boy between them. No tuxedos, no matching napkins, just syrup on cheeks and laughter between bites. Tommy leaned back in his chair and sighed. This is the best family day. Neither parent corrected him, because he wasn't wrong. The news didn't cover their union. No public statement from Lind Corp. No filtered photo with a scenic backdrop. Inside the company, only a few close associates knew. Even fewer spoke of it. Luca didn't need a press cycle to validate his life. He had once thought power meant visibility. Now, he understood differently. Privacy was the new strength. He turned down every request to speak publicly about his new chapter. When asked about future plans, he simply said, "We're doing well. That's all." No hashtags, no photo spreads. Just long walks, shared routines, and a boy who always asked to be carried up the last 2 stairs because it's tradition. Sofian had no interest in becoming someone else's story. She had written enough of her own, and Luca didn't want their piece turned into someone's headline. They had both tasted public pressure in different ways. This life wasn't for broadcast. It was for building, for showing up to parent-teacher conferences on time, for remembering birthdays without alerts, for choosing to hold hands at grocery stores, not galas. Their story wasn't trending. It was steady, and for the first time in a long time, they were fine with being unseen by the world. Because they were seen by each other. Sunday mornings became their rhythm. No alarm clocks, no schedules, just the smell of coffee, cartoon noise in the background, and the creak of the old hallway floor. Luca read the news beside the window. Sofian folded laundry across from him. Tommy built towers from blocks, knocking them down and starting over. They didn't post updates, didn't feel the need to document every smile. The moments weren't proof of happiness, they were happiness. Presence replaced pressure. Luca no longer checked metrics on his life. No scoreboard, no invisible audience to impress. He simply showed up. To help Tommy with homework, to rinse dishes without being asked, to listen when Sofian spoke, not to reply, but to understand. She noticed. One night, as they sat in bed reading separate books, she closed hers and looked at him. "You know what I like?" she asked. He glanced over. "What?" "That you're not trying to be impressive anymore." He smiled. "That's new for me." She reached for his hand. "Keep going." They didn't toast to anniversaries or hire photographers. They chose presence. And in that choice, they found what had eluded them for years. Not attention, not applause, but peace, with each other, with themselves, and with the quiet love they'd earned. Luca Agan still signed contracts. He still made decisions that shaped markets, but behind the scenes, everything had shifted. He stopped walking into rooms like they owed him something. He started listening, really listening, before he spoke. The board noticed his pace had changed. Investors asked fewer questions because they sensed his focus had sharpened. But it wasn't pressure that fueled him anymore. It was peace. He no longer scheduled his days down to the minute. He blocked off time for school plays, cancelled international calls to attend parent-teacher meetings, set up quiet dinners with no agenda. His executive assistant once asked, "Should I reschedule this for something more high-level?" Luca replied, "That was high-level. It just didn't wear a tie." He still led Lind Corp, but he didn't need to control every room. He trusted his team more, delegated, chose mentorship over domination. The man who once built an empire by force had learned something new. Legacy doesn't come from domination. It comes from presence. He was no longer chasing reputation. He was leading his family without spectacle, without script. Not because of image, because of conviction. Because when trust enters quietly, it changes the tone of everything after it. Sofian never asked to be saved. She had never lived waiting for rescue. Even now, after marriage, stability, and the return of someone who could have overwhelmed her world, she stayed grounded in who she was. She continued working part-time with a legal non-profit, helping low-income mothers navigate custody hearings. The office wasn't sleek. The files weren't glamorous, but the work mattered. When asked why she didn't take time off, she answered plainly, "Because women like me don't get to forget how hard it was." She wore the past like armor, not to fight, but to walk freely. At home, she kept her rhythms. She still paid bills herself, still tracked household budgets, still reminded Tommy to put his backpack by the door before bed. She cooked, Not because anyone expected her to, but because it was how she reset. She didn't shrink inside her new life. She expanded it, on her terms. Luca noticed. He never tried to interrupt that flow. He supported it, asked how he could make space for it, made sure nothing about his world silenced hers. She remained steady. Her strength wasn't in stubbornness. It was in balance, and in never handing over the power she'd earned through years of quiet perseverance. Tommy didn't know about stocks or strategy. He didn't care about last names on building plaques or whose name funded the children's hospital. What he cared about was simple, that someone picked him up on time, that bedtime stories were finished without phones buzzing in between, that both his parents showed up to the science fair, even if his volcano project collapsed in the parking lot. He didn't feel pressure to follow footsteps. He followed eye contact. He didn't carry expectations. He carried a backpack with a Spider-Man patch and 3 sharpened pencils. He loved pancakes, hated onions, asked questions with the curiosity of a child who had never been brushed off mid-sentence. One afternoon, after a school talent show, he ran into his father's arms, beaming. "Did you see me?" "Every second," Luca said. Sofian hugged him from the other side. "You were brave." Tommy didn't ask if he was the best. He asked if they had snacks in the car. Love built that in him. A confidence not tied to pressure. A sense of safety not tied to performance. He thrived, not because he was being prepared for power, but because he was being loved for exactly who he was. That was enough. Years later, nothing went viral. There were no dramatic headlines, no mansion tours, no scandalous reveals. Just a family who blended without noise. On Saturday mornings, they grocery shopped together. On weeknights, they played board games, each with their own rules, half made up by Tommy. They celebrated small wins, like Luca remembering Pajama Day, or Sofian finishing a long week of court filings. When people asked what changed, neither of them gave speeches. They said, "We learned to stay," because staying was the hard part. Staying when trust is hard-earned. Staying without a script. Staying when it would be easier to rewrite, run, or reach for control. They stayed, and because they did, they healed. Not because they were perfect, but because they were consistent. No stage, no crowd, just hands held in hallways, just shared glances over dinner, just a boy who knew exactly where home was, and who built it with him. In the end, that was the story. No silver linings, just real growth, real love. And this final truth, this story was never about money. It was about timing, about trust, earned late, but held fully. Sometimes, life doesn't hand us perfect beginnings. Sometimes, the people we love the most don't arrive on time. And the ones who hurt us didn't mean to, but they still left marks we had to heal from on our own. But healing isn't always loud. It doesn't always show up in grand gestures or flawless timing. Sometimes, healing looks like this: 2 people learning to stay, to listen, to let go of the urge to control everything, and instead show up consistently. It takes strength to speak up, but it takes even more to stay when silence feels safer, to build when it would be easier to protect your walls, to choose peace even when pain is louder. This story was never about wealth. It was about what happens when power steps aside and presence steps in. When love doesn't demand a stage, it simply pulls up a chair, looks you in the eye, and says, "I'm not leaving." So if you're holding something heavy, if you've missed moments, if you've been the one forgotten, or the one arriving late, know this: it's not too late to become who your story needs. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be real, because truth whispered in love is always enough. Thank you for watching Mr. Victor Storytime. If this story moved you, drop a heart in the comments and share it with someone who believes in second chances. We tell stories that speak to your soul, so don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with us. Your story matters, always.